Hi, I'm Attorney Chris Rike with Traffic Law Guys, and in this video I want to talk about reckless driving. What is it? What are the penalties? And what are some possible defenses to this charge? Arizona defines reckless driving as a person who drives a vehicle with reckless disregard for the safety of other people or property is guilty of reckless driving. What does this mean? It's kind of a vague statute. It can be interpreted a lot of different ways by different people. Not surprisingly, we'll get police officers, attorneys, and judges that all view this differently. One way to look at it is a reasonable person standard. So if a driver is doing something that the reasonable person thinks would be dangerous to other people or property, but the driver does it anyways, so there's an assumption that the driver understands that this is dangerous but disregards that danger and does it anyways, that's when you're going to get a reckless driving ticket. I think sometimes we see reckless driving tickets when there is not actually reckless driving, but that could just be the defense attorney in me. I'm going to talk about some examples of situations where we see reckless driving tickets issued. One of the most common ones is high speeds, just like criminal speeding. So if somebody's really exceeding the speed limit by a lot, like say they're doubling the speed limit, that would be a situation where we'd probably see a reckless driving ticket on top of an excessive speed charge. An excessive speed in Arizona is a criminal violation that can be issued if a driver is exceeding the speed limit by more than 20 miles per hour. So a lot of times we'll see an excessive speed charge and a reckless driving charge together. And sometimes we see these even when the actual speed isn't that bad. So maybe it's 115 and a 75, we still might see a reckless driving charge. And where it starts to get even more gray is, let's say a driver is speeding, they're going 115 and 75, and there's no other cars around, and they've, got a Porsche or something that's not dangerous at those speeds. So that's a little bit different than if somebody's going 115 in rush hour traffic and zipping in and out of traffic. One definitely seems more dangerous than the other, but both could be charged as reckless driving. So another situation where we see reckless driving charge is if a driver kind of engages in a series or a pattern of traffic violations. So sometimes we'll see a police officer will notice a driver maybe run a red light. The police officer follows them, and then they're following somebody too closely, and then they do an illegal U-turn, and then they make a unsafe lane change, all back to back. That police officer might issue a reckless driving charge, especially if there's a lot of pedestrians around or other traffic, or they're just kind of presenting a danger to other traffic, other cars around them. Another popular situation for reckless driving are donuts or burnouts. Especially on private property. If somebody's doing, say, donuts in the parking lot of a grocery store, the idea is, well, they're presenting a danger to any bystanders that may be around, and they're also doing damage to property by leaving tire marks all over the place. Maybe sometimes they will hit parking blocks or do other damage to the property, so that could be a situation where you see reckless driving ticket. And sometimes we'll see a reckless driving ticket in the context of a traffic accident. The vast majority of traffic accidents we see are just that. They're accidents. Somebody wasn't paying attention or just made a mistake that caused them to hit another car. There wasn't a reckless disregard for safety. The situations where it might be reckless is if somebody's, let's say, drag racing another car, or the speed's a factor. Let's say they were going 80 in a 40 mile per hour zone that caused them to crash into another car. There's a reckless component to it, much more than just a simple accident. Now, reckless driving, when we look at penalties, there are kind of two tiers here. There's a first-time offender penalties, and then there are additional penalties if a driver has previously been convicted of reckless driving in the prior 24 months. For a first-time offense, if you're convicted of reckless driving, it's a Class 2 misdemeanor in Arizona. So there are 3 levels of misdemeanor, Class 1 being the most serious, like a DUI, Class 3 being the least serious, like a excessive speed ticket. Reckless driving is kind of in the middle there, a Class 2. So a Class 2 misdemeanor carries the potential for a fine up to $750 plus surcharges and assessments, which could get the total fine close to $1,500. Now, we don't usually see fines that high, but that's what's legally permissible under the law. It also carries the possibility for up to 2 years probation and up to 4 months of jail. And reckless driving is an 8-point violation in Arizona. So it's very severe on the motor vehicle division side. 8 points, same as a DUI. 8 points is always going to result in some sort of corrective action from the MVD. At a minimum, it's going to be an 8-hour traffic survival school class. If the driver has other violations in the prior 12 months, it could be a license suspension for some period of time. If you're convicted of a reckless driving conviction, the judge can also suspend your driving privileges. Now, as far as what do we usually see for first-time offenses, it's usually a fine far less than the maximum, something in the $300 to $700 range. We usually do not see jail time. We usually don't see probation. So usually it's the misdemeanor conviction, the fine, and the points are going to be the primary consequences here. Now, where reckless driving can be really problematic is a second conviction. So basically, if you get a reckless driving conviction within 24 months of another reckless driving conviction, or an aggressive driving conviction, or racing, or exhibition of speed, or a DUI, the consequences are going to be more severe. So a second conviction is a class 1 misdemeanor, so same as a DUI. It's going to have a mandatory 20 days in jail, up to 6 months as possible, but it's going to be a mandatory 20. The fines are going to be up to $2,500 plus the surcharges and assessments, which could get it close to $5,000. It's going to be up to 3 years probation. You're still going to get the 8 points on your license, and there's going to be a 1-year mandatory license suspension from a second conviction. Now let's talk about defending against a reckless driving case. So these are really going to be fact specific. A defendant's going to be looking for ways to argue that they were not driving in a manner that created any danger to people or property. So when I talked earlier about speeding, maybe you're looking to say there were no other people or cars or any property around that could have been damaged by what the driver was doing. Also going to be looking at, did the officer have an opportunity to observe what he's saying happened? Where was the officer positioned? What could he see? Is there any dash camera video or body cam video that shows any of this? Beyond looking for factual arguments, there's also what we call mitigation. So you're looking at your driving history. Does the driver have a clean record? Any other prior traffic violations? What kind of person are they? Do they do a lot of community service, volunteer work? Are they a member of a church? Anytime you're trying to negotiate a better outcome in a criminal case like this, the defendant's background can make a big difference. What kind of person is the defendant? How do they generally conduct their lives? If they're a peaceful and productive person who's always trying to help other people out, that can go a long way towards getting a better outcome. If there's somebody who just has a history of criminal traffic violations and doesn't really active in their community, then that creates some hurdles in a case like this. Hopefully this video helps explain a little bit about reckless driving. If you find yourself in a situation where you're facing a reckless driving charge, we do offer free consults. Give us a call. We're happy to talk through the facts with you and offer you some direction, and maybe we can help.